think I got it. I just think
Right
it
here.
was muted earlier. I unmuted
I got it. We got it now. Go ahead. Ooh, yeah, that one off. All right, we should be good.
Okay, thank you, Planning Chair, Commissioners, members of the public in the audience and on Zoom. I'm happy we worked through all the technical difficulties. We're here tonight. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm going to spend the next few minutes discussing P1930, and this is an application for a Type 3 cultivation CUP, as well as a 500-foot property line variance. This project is located in Zinnia, and is on an unclassified zoned parcel in a resource general plan designated parcel. The parcel is roughly 80 acres. So this parcel is already within the commercial cannabis program here in Trinity County, with a small type license. It's license number 9. The surrounding parcels are primarily for service, residential or vacant. And the parcel sizes range from, let me see if I can get this a little closer. Oh, taking the thing with me. It's fine. Sorry, just to be difficult. Okay, so the parcel size range generally from about 7.5 acres to 552.9 acres. And if you look, the parcel is within the Southern Trinity planning area identified within our general plan, and a majority of parcels within that area are typically Forest Service parcels. Going into what this project entails, the project description. So currently there are 6 existing greenhouses for mature canopy and 1 existing for immature or clones. There are 2 greenhouses on the property if you kind of look away from more the general project area, but those are decommissioned, so they're not part of the project. I spoke to Cannabis Code Compliance about it, and there's been talks about potentially just demolishing the greenhouses since they're not intended to be part of future operations. In addition, there is a shop for processing, harvest storage, and an admin hold, a proposed shop for processing, a compost area. There is a well dedicated to cannabis use, a 1,500-gallon water tank, and a 2,825-gallon water tank for cultivation use as well. If you look on the project site map, there is a pond which is dedicated to wildlife, fire suppression, and livestock. There is a structure dedicated to ag and chem storage, a nutrient tank, and a general storage structure. Other features on site include septic, leach field, propane, and a domestic well, domestic water tank. As far as who's going to be on site, there are 3 seasonal employees anticipated and 5 temporary employees each year, but no permanent employees. Between the employees and trips necessary for business operation, there's expected to be a maximum of 30 trips generated per day. So this is to account for the commuting employees. If employees who live on site will travel about 2 trips a day, 2 trips a day for ag materials and supplies coming in and out, as well as exporting product. So when we're looking at the light impact of this project, it is a requirement of the cannabis program that any security lighting be downcasted. And at this point, if you were to read the ISMND and parts of the project described in the staff report, there's mentioned of like how the greenhouses are going to be used. So given our current cannabis ordinance, mixed light type 3 is not currently allowed, but it's scoped into the environmental document. But as there's not going, since it's not currently allowed for mixed light, there's not currently going to be any artificial lighting of the canopy within the greenhouses. So, but if there are mitigation measures, if that ever is a possibility in the future in the document, but it's not currently part of the project that's proposed. In addition, there is a stream to the east of the greenhouses, and we went out on site. There are some site photos attached as a staff report, and we found them to be in the proper setback from that stream. And there was also a wetlands delineation report submitted as part of the environmental review and I believe forwarded to environmental health. So they have that as well as our cannabis staff to make sure that all necessary setbacks are accounted for. Because for specifically cannabis operations, there's additional setbacks required from any cultivation activities from any streams or waterways. The project is going to be serviced by PG&E. And as far as vegetation on site, there is Douglas fir, Oregon white oak, California black oak, ponderosa, and Pacific madrone. And as mentioned, there are multiple water features on site, some stemming from the Van Dusen River. Going into the referral process and review of this project, AB 52 consistent tribal consultation letters were sent out in 2020, and there was no response requesting consultation. And last year, there was additional requests for comments sent out to local, so county departments, as well as some state or federal departments. And so from that comment period, there were no comments received from Forest Service, PG&E, Ruth Lake, or DOT. We received a no comment from the assessor's office, and we did receive comments from environmental health and CAL FIRE, which those comments were incorporated into the conditions of the project. In addition, the ISMND was circulated for the state clearinghouse and public review. So over at our office, and so we did postings for that if we had any public comments or concerns on the project. And that was from October 12th, 2022 through November 14th, 2022. And we received 2 comment letters from that circulation process from CDFW and DCC, which we typically anticipate they like to comment on our cannabis projects. And so we got from CDFW, we got comments regarding greenhouse gas emissions, the wetland delineation, which I kind of referred to earlier with the riparian setbacks, lighting, noise, the lake and stream bed alteration agreement, and impacts to wildlife. From DCC, we got comments regarding the programmatic EIR for the cannabis program, a request for the plans mentioned in the environmental document. So that includes like the noise attenuation, light attenuation, odor control, for those all to be forwarded to them by the applicant. Questions regarding the project description, air quality, biological resources, and the mandatory findings of significance. So after we got all those comments, we forwarded them to both our land use consultants, SHN, and to our cannabis environmental consultants that we have in the office. And they both reviewed and responded to those comments. And then there was like another review from environmental compliance to SHN back to environmental compliance. And so that's how we kind of formulated all of our responses. And then we incorporated that into the environmental document. So one of our environmental compliance staff are on call, and I told them to have the ISMND ready if there were any questions. So they'll be available for that. And so all that environmental said, if we take a look at the general plan designation, it's resource, which our general plan doesn't really speak to cannabis operations, but historically, resource and the intent of the designation has been found to be consistent with cannabis operations. Since the parcel is zoned unclassified, there are some ag uses which are principally permitted, so as right on the district, but in the description for unclassified, listed as uses permitted by use permit, essentially says any other use if you secure a use permit for it and it's consistent with the area. And then if we take a look at the development standards for the unclassified district, it can be found that the project as currently proposed meets all the required setbacks. There aren't any structures that exceed the maximum allowable building height. So we find that the project is consistent with those development standards. This project is requesting a 500-foot property line variance. So for all type 3s, it's required that all cultivation activity be at least 500 feet from the property line, or they need to secure a variance. So I included a residential setback map as part of the staff report and included the 500-foot property line. So in the discussion, I allude to the little greenhouse that is closest to the southern boundary as the closest structure. That house burnt down. So that house isn't actually there anymore. They're intending to rebuild, but there is nothing there. So if we take a look, and we were out on site, but it's really hard to see that northernmost closest house, southernmost closest house from the site. So through desktop review, that southern house looks, and that's the one labeled 2080, looks to be about 1,750 feet away. And that northern house looks to be about 2,680 feet away. And that's just using our ARC to map that out.
That's 1590. Is the northern house?
Oh, so that point is in our addressing points. That's like unaddressed, none other. So there are some addresses that our GIS consultant finds, but doesn't link to a residence, but she still marks it as an address point.
So there's no home there.
No.
To the north, there is no home.
So the closest one that we were able to identify is 820.
Correct.
820.
20.
820 is all the way at the top. And 820 is how far?
Okay.
When I did a desktop review, it was roughly 2,680 feet away.
In 1961, what is that?
That burned down.
Correct. But it was a what?
It was a residence before.
It
Yeah.
was.
Mhm.
And they do intend to rebuild?
They intend to rebuild. They are also in our cannabis program.
On residence 280 and 2431, didn't both of those places burn down?
So I did a little bit of desktop review on that. And
Because I believe one was Jeff Graham's and the other one was a guy named Prosser, and both of their places burnt down. And I believe those were the two residences also that were there.
it's quite possible. So I found proof of burn down for 1961, but I spent a little bit of time doing it for 2080 and I wasn't able to. And I did a little bit of Google Earth, like searching around, and I saw it, but it's quite possible that it
Okay,
burnt down too.
I'm pretty confident because if I'm pretty confident that both of those actually are gone as well.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. But so the variance criteria that we use for the 350 foot setback and other variances would apply to this project as well. So we have a standard list of criteria that we like to look at. The first being no special privilege. So that would be this variance should be granted and reasonable for like unique hardship on the property owner. So if you kind of take a look at the location of the structures and how the property line setback is, the proposed cultivation activities are they exceed the 500 foot setback, both on the north and the south. And it would be difficult for the cultivation to move more to the west because that's kind of becomes a more sloped terrain. And it would be difficult to move closer to the south just because there's a stream right there. So they wouldn't be able to move on top of that without then again getting too close to the eastern property line. So we believe that it's not special treatment by recommending this variance go forward. In addition, the granting of this variance wouldn't allow any special use that otherwise wouldn't be allowed in this district with a use permit. The granting of the variance, we don't believe will cause a disservice. So it's with a variance, the main reason for them that staff has been able to identify as far as the cultivation setback variances is recognizing the residents as a sensitive receptor. So when we look at the 500-foot property line setback, we want to say, okay, well, is there some form of functional equivalent, or can we tell that a sensitive receptor is not going to be negatively impacted by this cultivation activity? And since we know that the cultivation is going to be much further away than 500 feet from any sensitive receptor or neighboring residents, then we can say that there's not going to be a disservice permitted by allowing a variance from this 500-foot property line setback requirement. Finally, or actually, there's two more criteria, sorry. Additionally, there has to be no adverse impact to a general plan or any specific plans, which took a look at the land use element and couldn't find anything to state that the granting of variance would be contradictory. And I couldn't locate any adopted specific plans for this area, so there's no contradiction. And this parcel is not located in an RD1 or the recreation overlay, which prohibits variances. So those are the variance findings, but we also have required conditional use permit findings as well. So the first of those is sound principles of land use. So based on our review of zoning consistency, of environmental review, of general plan consistency, we believe that this project is founded in sound principles of land use as it adheres with our existing county ordinance and general plan. We do not find it to be injurious due to the fact that given the environmental review and the findings of the variance, there is not found to be any significant impacts to the environment or to the surrounding neighbors. And like I said earlier, the project is found to be consistent with the unclassified district and with the general plan, so there is plan consistency there. The ISMND can be usually it can be located in our office. I have it with me tonight, just in case there are any questions I can help with, but it's been available for public review since it was originally circulated, and this is the version of it with the strike through, I believe. And there's also a version of the currently up-to-date document on our website that's been available for public review as well. And it's been up there since we originally circulated the document at the state clearinghouse. And through our environmental compliance staff and through our land use consultants SHN's review and incorporating the comments that we got during that circulation period, we believe that this document is adequate in evaluating all potential significant impacts that this project could have, and that any impacts are less than significant. That all being said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the CEQA determination of a. Wait, before I do that, I want to talk about conditions. I apologize. Okay, this project has some conditions. What are they? So there are some boilerplate conditions that we put on every type 3 project, and that is just to show the conditions that just come into the cannabis ordinance. But there are some project specific conditions here. So earlier I kind of glossed over environmental health comments. They are all located within the conditions. And shortly before we were initially going to speak on this project earlier in January, we had a sit down planning staff, cannabis staff, environmental health staff, and the project applicant and agent to discuss any outstanding concerns, the conditions, the comments submitted on the project. And at this point, they have submitted documentation to environmental health in response to their conditions. For example, a wastewater discharge plan addressing the wastewater drain in an existing shop, making any corrections to the wastewater and runoff plans, contingency plans, and waste management plans, And all of those would need to be approved by environmental health prior to license issuance for this project. In addition, the project will need to meet all CAL FIRE fire safety requirements for that. So that's the 4290 and 4291 requirements. The project would need to have all necessary building permits be issued and final prior to operating in those structures. And there are some mitigation measures that were brought up within the ISMND. And so that includes mitigations for nesting birds. There is mitigations required during any construction activities. Mitigations regarding special status plant species, regarding if there are any cultural or paleontological sources on site and what to do in those situations, and one condition regarding utilities on site. So all the conditions beyond that are pulled from County Code Chapter 17.43, and the MMRP, which staff would request adoption of as part of the approval of the environmental document, is the program in which county reviews the ISMND conditions and make sure that the project is consistent and compliant with those conditions and adheres to them. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to where I was before. So with that considered, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the CEQA determination of a mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and approve conditional use permit and variance P1930 based on the recommended findings in Resolution 2023-01 and subject to the conditions of approval set forth in Exhibit A to Resolution 2023-01. And I know that the agent is here and is available to speak to any questions, as well as environmental compliance staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Is there any questions for staff in regards to her report?
One thing that I need to share, it was,
Is there any
Prob-
questions?
oh, no, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay. I have a question, Ms. Fisher. On your bubble, where you show your variance needs,
Yes.
which one of the buildings, and I'm speaking of your setback map, where it shows your bubble,
Mhm.
which one of those white buildings pushes the bubble to the north? Is it the white indicator that you show there? I'm not sure how these maps are working there.
Here, I'm going to pull up the site plan.
Mhm.
So that northernmost blob is representative of a proposed cultivation area. So that's an outdoor cultivation space.
Correct. So are any of the marks that you have on there, they don't actually represent anything that is proposed?
Well, it's so. a lot
And I'm
of it-
speaking of the white boxes you have in there.
Yeah, so if we're looking at the residential setback map, a lot of it is just is eyeballing, because so a lot of this area is proposed, and we draw these maps based on aerial imagery, comparing it to what's proposed on the site maps submitted to staff. But even when we're doing a site visit like we did for this project, since we don't know the exact property line boundaries, it's very difficult for us to be able to measure from one point to another. So we use this more of a visual representation of the approximated area of where everything is and what the setback would be from all the designated cultivation.
So, I mean, in order to grant a variance, it would be pretty important to know where the property line is to establish that variance. I mean, that is kind of a purpose, I mean, that would be a necessary item I think to have, to know. I mean, to develop a variance and to ask for a variance, you would need to establish a property line to have a baseline to go off of. And I'm just, for us to make a good decision, we would need you guys to know that and be able to show that on a map, that this is where the property line exists. Because we're talking about feet.
Right.
And I mean, if it came down to, and I'm just give you an example with the variance that we gave at the airport, to put a hangar out further. I mean, there was an established line, there was a pin, we could see it on the map. It's this many feet across. Is it okay? So I'm guessing it's probably not adequate. And it's just a comment. I mean, it doesn't leave me with enough information to make an educated decision. The other question I have for you is on the building that I think it's called out as, it's a proposed cultivation site. What is the dimension? I'm trying to look for the number. Well, it's the 10,000 foot area. Proposed cultivation area. What is the dimensions of that? It's on your figure 2 site plan. Yeah, and I'm assuming, so because you don't have accurate numbers, I'm assuming that piece of the puzzle is what's pushing that line so far across, right?
So the northernmost proposed cultivation area. So like what by what essentially?
Right.
Okay, I can check right now and see. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's.
What would be the math on that?
80 by 160, that's not 10,000 square feet.
That's 12,800 square feet, so it'd be a bit smaller than that, maybe?
I bet the cultivator knows exactly the size of that structure.
It's cultivation area. Well, we're asking tonight if you want to let us know.
I would also, I can address it now. I think Bella might be accurate in the 12,000 square feet because they get 10,000 square feet of canopy. So that allows for space in between the plants to exceed that 10,000 square feet. So
Perfect. So the 80 by 160 be
I
pretty
think
accurate.
that's accurate. Yes.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. What did you say the distances were to the properties that may or may not have been burned? Were they something like 1,800 feet or something?
So for the one where I'm not sure whether or not it burned, the 2080, that was 1,700 feet.
Oh, okay. And what was the other one?
1961.
So for 1961, that was. So that one did burn down and that was 670.
Okay.
That's cultivation site to home site.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Is there any other questions for staff? Okay, if there's no further questions from staff, we'd like to hear from the applicant at this time.
Good evening. My name is Deidre Brower, and I'm representing the applicant, Jeff Cadella. I want to thank you all for making this happen. I believe there were some technical difficulties, so I appreciate all of your efforts to get us here tonight. Thank you, Skylar, for the introduction to the project. I think you did a great job. This really is a good site for this sort of development. You can see that there are not nearby neighbors. The location on the property, while it does require a setback from property lines or variance for those setbacks, it's the most environmentally friendly option, and there are not neighbors in these property areas. If you moved to the west, the property becomes steep and wooded and would require a lot of development and mitigation measures for that. Additionally, in the fish and game projects that are part of it, they're really just to decommission some stream crossings and smooth it all out, and they don't require a lot of work or disturbance. Both neighbors that are within the 500-foot setback have submitted letters of support for the project. And I also wanted to just note that the traffic assumptions that the document made are, we find extraordinary and don't ever anticipate 30 trips in a day. But I understand you had to say the maximum it could be, but I don't really ever see anything like that happening. Mr. Godella was an early adopter of the cannabis program. As Skylar mentioned, his license is number 9. He enrolled quickly in the water board before there was a program here. He hired Pacific Watershed Associations and has always hired professionals to make sure he's doing things right for the land and everything concerned. The conditions that environmental health asked for, a light attenuation plan, a noise attenuation plan, runoff, et cetera. We got those all answered and turned into them. It's been really great. We submitted this project in July of 2019, so it's been a long time coming. And we're happy to be here, but I also wanted to just mention that this last several months of getting through this process, Skylar and the staff and Ricky, everybody has been really great communicative with us. And also Jeff has been, anytime he was given something to do, he just did it and didn't fuss about it and waste time and dilly-dally. We got it done. And that's really all I have to add after Skylar's description. But if you have any questions, we are here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from the commission for the applicant? Thank you very much. This time I'll open it up for public comment. Is there anybody in the room that'd like to comment? Anybody on Zoom?
I would.
Please state your name for the record.
Nicholas Holiday, Burnt Ranch.
Go ahead, Nicholas.
Hi, I'd just like to say that I know that Jeff has been in this program for a long time. I've worked with him in the past as far as, just being one of the other cultivators that really takes this seriously, is professional. He has the right property for it. He's jumped through all the hoops that we've all jumped through. And I really think that he's a great candidate for this. I think that he is someone, and his property is somewhere that this sort of project should be accepted and passed on. I'm in full support of this. Jeff is, like I said, one of the more professional farmers that we have in the county, and he would definitely be someone great to have in the program if you can continue on with this. So yeah, I just wanted to say his property meets all the setbacks and does all the goals. It's kind of a no-brainer. So I hope that you guys can pass this through. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Liz McIntosh.
Good evening, Chair Sharp and Commissioners. Liz McIntosh, District 4. I first started corresponding with Jeff through social media about advocating for sensible cannabis regulations all the way back in 2015 when the first medical laws were passed. And though I haven't really had an opportunity to get him to know him personally, I do feel that I can speak to his professional character and reputation. Obviously, as license number 9, he's been working toward this since the very beginning. In the years that I spent as a cannabis advocate, I attended just about every meeting and workshop offered here, as well as at the BOS, and Jeff was a staple participant. He's been an active member in the Trinity County Agricultural Alliance and currently serves as a board member. He's demonstrated his care for more than just himself by being an advocate for others to be compliant. I've seen him give advice to other industry entrepreneurs about best practices and sustainability. Obviously, his property is pretty ideal. And the fact that he's held this license in good standing for so long is a testament to his efforts to be a great neighbor. His dedication and commitment, really, they're just exemplary. He's led by example, and I think he's exactly the kind of business owner that we should be proud to have represent Trinity County cannabis industry. I'm thrilled that this is before you, and it would be so great to see you unanimously approve this project tonight. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Ben?
Hi, Ben Brady from Wildwood. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, commissioners. I've known Jeff for 7 years, and as the previous speaker said, he's been a very positive and contributing member of this community, as well as of the cannabis program. He's been very patient throughout this process. As was said, he submitted for this project in 2019, and he's waited patiently, and during that time, he's followed all of the rules. He offers support to the program, all while waiting his turn patiently, waiting for his turn to appear before you tonight. So glad that we're finally here tonight. I have nothing but positive things to say about Jeff. He's an upstanding member of this community. He's been here for a long time. I've always found him to be respectful, a caring friend, a considerate community member. So with that being said, I won't take any more of your time. I'd encourage you to vote to approve this project tonight and give Jeff a chance to get his business up and going here. He deserves it. This project has earned the right to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
That's everybody.
All right, at this time, I'm going to close it to public comment unless there's somebody on the floor that would like to speak. Please state your name for the record.
John Brower from Junction City, and I concur with all the previous commenters. The applicant is, a leader in the community and the industry, and operates his business in a very responsible way. His standing within the industry is pure platinum, and he's an awesome ambassador for what this program can look like and how it can operate in a responsible way. So I want to encourage approval of the mitigated neg deck, the conditional use permit, which has 61 conditions of approval that I can't imagine too many other hopeful business operators would be willing to agree to, but he is. And he's got letters of support from the neighbors that require a variance. And it's been a long time coming to get here, a lot of hard work. And I'm hopeful that this will get approved tonight and he can get to work. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Is there anybody else on the floor? Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioners, feel free to share.
Okay, I need to disclose on January 9th, I was invited out to Jeff's place to he asked me if I'd come by and look at the to get a on-site view of the property. So I wanted to give you all a heads up that I have been there. But the thing is, it's like I've known Jeff for a long time, and I was when he was originally building his house, he had asked me to build the house when I was doing that, and I ended up was supposed to, but then I ended up declining at the last minute. And so I'm very familiar with this property. In fact, also the house that burnt down just to the south on our residential setback map is the number 1961. The previous owners were very good friends of mine, and I spent a lot of time at that residence as well with bonfires and stuff of that nature. And so it's like I'm very familiar with the property. But on January 9th, I want you to know that while I was there, that was in the middle of all the rain that we had and the flooding and all of that, and I had to go through flooded roads to get there. And truth of the matter is, you don't see it on these maps here, but the areas that is marked out here, it's like that's really about the only place that you could grow because of the circumstances just to the I guess that'd be just to the north. When you come onto the property, there is like just to the north of the cultivation site, the proposed cultivation site.
You mean here?
Correct, right down through here.
Okay.
There's a stream that only flows during intense amount of rain. And so it's like, and that was during that. And also there was another one coming down on this side. So basically he's technically landlocked, and really the only proposed place that he can grow is for this site to work is the spot there without putting in being able to cross over the Van Dusen and get on the other side, but that's opening up a lot more intensive stuff. So I just wanted to share with you everything that Skylar said I saw, but I wanted to say that nobody mentioned the thing about all the extra water, but I was there in the middle of all the flooding. And so I saw that. And I just wanted to throw that out there so that y'all are aware of the extra things that I had seen.
I have a quick question for the applicant. And I'm speaking to your 80 by 160 cultivation area. Would you consider rotating that 180 degrees and moving it towards your storage area to back up your other greenhouses to try to alleviate that variance of the 347 feet to the north? You could gain about 100 feet, it looks like, from the way this map lays, and may negate the need for most of your variance.
Power lines right there.
That would put it over my leach lines and my septic tank, and there's power lines right there, sort of where that driveway is shown. There's a power pole right there. You don't know what I'm pointing at, but no, I mean, that's, I mean,
I'm looking, and yeah, it's hard for us to tell with these maps, unfortunately.
there's
But this,
power lines running like this way right here,
sure.
right? So they kind of bisect, and then that would put,
So if I'm looking at
Lengthwise.
this map right here, it's kind of a blow up, which give us a better idea of what your active site looks like now. Can you describe for us where those power lines run?
so if you just drew a straight line between the two, and they pretty much go in, can I just bring it up?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much.
So I know there's power poles where I drew the dots between each line, and then that just pretty much goes to that parcel and then goes out. Gotcha. But also all of this, I have a well right here. I have my septic here. And if you rotated that rectangle, it would push it further out this way. And that's one of those class 3s that that only runs when it's absolutely pouring rain.
So what I'm kind of looking at is this right here. What I was looking at is taking this and putting in that slot right there next to your storage building. This is where your this is called out as a 10, which is a future. I'll tell you what it
Cut
is.
trees down and have to.
It's called out as existing
There's a
greenhouse
road.
storage area.
I have a road right here. So this is my septic here. There's the power poles are like.
We put it right next to the house.
So the house, I think, is right here, right?
No, the house is right. This is a building and this is a proposed. I mean, we showed this as far as we could, this road to, just still use my driveway, not have to redo that. But like, there's trees here, there's trees here now. There used to be trees here.
So if I'm looking at this map, I mean, it appears that there's no anything on this side of your greenhouses. Space, that's your house now, right?
So these are the two trees I'm talking about.
Okay.
These are my leach lines, like right. And that's why pretty much nothing's there. That's why.
Well, the idea is to try to get you to get, out of that variance,
Sure.
so you're not gonna have issues in the future. You don't ever have to come back. About here.
That's another proposed area right here.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Would you be adverse to taking those trees out, putting it there?
There's still a telephone pole. I'm just on it. But yeah, I don't want to lose the trees either. I don't have as much shade as I used to have. This used to be all tree limbs. And we were originally going to do it further this way, but the trees are not going to push the limbs, but it's still.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to put a motion on the table?
I have some questions after the motion.
So, we want to discuss it more before we put out a motion. I think so. So with lack of a motion, let's go ahead and discuss it some more. Have some questions, Commissioner Fall?
Yeah, I didn't have any technical questions earlier. Thank you. That was a very thorough presentation, Skylar. I had a general question, just I'm still learning. So I looked at the 7 Title 3, 7 Type 3 licenses that we've issued over the last few years. And so 2 of them were done by Bilderberg, 2 by Flowra, and 3 by Planning Department. And so when you guys do the ISMND, do you get paid for that versus someone paying the consultant to do that? How does that work?
So we take in one environmental review fee, and that is for staff time spent on an ISMND. So that is whether one is, and that's $1,760. And that is whether or not staff prepares it or is reviewing one that it's brought by a consultant. And so that fee covers my time of review. It would cover environmental compliance staff's time of review, and also our land use consultant SHN's time for review. And also like preparing the documents necessary for state clearinghouse circulation.
I'm just curious whether or not the planning department is essentially competing with the private sector when the private sector could be doing that work and then submitting the ISMND to you versus you guys. Anyway, I'm just curious how that works. Yeah, I'm learning. Thank you.
Historically,
Go ahead and state your name,
my
please.
name's Deidre Brower. And originally, like I mentioned earlier, we had submitted this in 2019. So when the first few conditional use permits were submitted, the county took on the development and the preparation of the ISMND. And then it later transitioned to, no, we don't have the resources for this. Go have it prepared privately with your own consultant. And then the planning staff is really just reviewing at that point. But prior to people having a private consultant do it, my recollection is that there was some contention is not the right word, but it was unclear, I think, to to staff and possibly the commission at that point, if that was acceptable to have a private company prepare it, which it turned out that that was standard practice in other places. But historically in Trinity, it had been to have the county prepare those documents. And so that's how it got started. And then it became clear that that's too much, which is kind of why it's been almost 4 years since we submitted that, and we're here today. So that's how. So now it is. Now I don't believe you guys prepare any, not for cannabis, I don't think, but you could speak better to that. But that's my historical recollection of that.
Well, yeah, I was asking that question for two reasons. One is, I keep hearing that the cannabis consultants are, needing business. So I'm just trying to figure out like if there's a competition there. And the other one is, I'm trying to figure out who actually authors these documents because I had questions about the ISMND and I wasn't sure if it's something that you guys wrote or something that the consultant wrote. So I didn't know who to ask because it's not clear when something's submitted by the planning department, which part they wrote and which part a consultant wrote.
As far as me consultant, I did not write it, but SHN as consultant played a role in it, as did county staff, as I understand.
So the planning department.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Brower. So then my second question is, in the ISMND, it talks about, there's bolded language that was added somehow that talks about, the county potentially allowing stacking of licenses in the future. And so my understanding is that stacking was not evaluated in the EIR. And so I'm a little concerned that by adding language in there that says, if it's allowed in the future, it's covered under this license and it's consistent with CEQA, that you guys might be getting yourself into trouble because it really maybe isn't consistent with CEQA because it wasn't in the EIR evaluation. Stacking wasn't. Am I making any sense there?
No, I understand your question. So that's something that we've discussed a lot in the office too, because there's stacking and then there's also the potential, I guess that goes with the stacking of if it was up to an acre of mixed light and what the ramifications of that would be. And I ask our environmental compliance staff to be ready if he wants to add anything. But I believe the intent of that is if there was ever a time where stacking were to be allowed, there would need to be revisions to the programmatic EIR as it exists currently,
right?
In order to evaluate those cumulative impacts. But for this point, we like to scope in more potential impacts and activities than less, and then have to worry about not covering potential activities.
But how can you say it's consistent with CEQA when it's not something that was considered? So my suggestion would be not to put the stacking language in this kind of license because you really can't say that it's consistent with CEQA, right? Because you don't know that it is because the EIR didn't consider it. So anyway, that's why I was trying to figure out who wrote this. And then the suggestion would be not to include that in the future, until you know that it has been evaluated. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was my comment.
That's a good comment. Makes sense. So, my questions are the same when it comes to variances as they always have been. They need to be a special circumstance. I do have a problem with this variance, and more so with staff's inability to confirm property lines. They're not sure where the property line is. I don't know how we can be sure what kind of variance we're asking for here if nothing's been flagged for you guys to actually measure. Guessing is not planning. So I do see by his description his need, but without accurate property lines marked out, how do we know what we're doing? Which makes a variance even more problematic, even in its nature that the history of variances with cannabis started out as it was an action put into the plan so legacy farmers could have medium-sized grows or 10,000 square foot grows on small parcels. Now that's went into, I know we've done 2 of these. The first one, the applicant actually came back to us and, revised his plan to get his project within his allowed area. The other one, the man was landlocked with the river and a mountain right behind him, and that was definitely a need. But there was true lines on both of those. And it seems like this is escalating now. So this guy needs a variance. We're not sure where the property line is. It's not because he's a legacy farmer. It's just because he wants to do a 1 acre instead of 10,000. So the variance is seeming to get looser and looser. It's not, a variance has never been a tool in planning for these kind of actions. A variance is supposed to be a burden and a hardship. Growing your business larger and asking for a variance to meet that growth is not a burden or a hardship on a business. The business is established. It's doing what it's doing. Growing it larger does not allow for a variance in the state code as variances are described. Especially when there isn't even, lot lines established and real measurements made, and accurate numbers presented. So I have a real problem approving a variance with those parameters in this situation. That's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Do you guys have a Venza or something where you could actually look at the property line when you're out there? Yeah, I mean, that's all the RCD when they're doing their fuel management projects, and they're trying to figure out if they're staying on your property versus from the county.
And another thing with that, Carol,
I think so it comes through N plan, which is based on the counties. I mean, I can get on the county planning website and look at kind of where they think the property line is, at least as close as they can get it. That would give you at least some tool to say, this is where, the mapping thinks it's not surveyed, no, but it's where the county tax assessor thinks my property is.
So that's what we use to measure the property line boundaries, is we use the assessor's parcel maps. But historically, the planning department hasn't made it a requirement to have a surveyor come out on property. Given that's, everything's always subject to change, given new direction provided to staff, but given cost potentially being onerous. For example, planning has to review building permits to make sure all setbacks are met, but we don't require that for every building permit, there's verified property lines. We just do it based on assessor's parcel map data.
Well, so that's my question. So if you're standing out on site, are you able to download the map and it'll tell you if I move 10 feet over here, it's where the assessor's office thinks the property line is? Do you have that tool to stand on site and do that? And so that's what you did here? No?
So I would have to verify how the setback was gotten for this report. I don't know if it was through that tool.
Yeah.
My former office.
Go ahead and state your name.
Deidre Brower. My former office did prepare that, and we worked closely with RCD to make sure that we did have their latest data and use the property lines that they had.
Okay, yeah.
And I know that over the last couple of years, they did get some additional where they were tightening up because it's kind of off all over the county. But they had been improving their system, and we just would coordinate with them regularly to make sure we had their data and had the most accurate that we could without the survey.
Thank you for that. I think it might be a good idea in the future for variances is to, have the applicant establish those property lines with a survey if they're going to need a variance. It would make it a simple tool. And and even if, they wouldn't even have to do a complete survey, just that line, so it wouldn't be too cumbersome in costs. Would anybody like to put a motion on the table?
I make a motion that we adopt the California Environmental Quality Act CEQA determination for mitigated negative declaration in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and approve the conditional use permit and variance, the P-19-30, based on the recommended findings of resolution 2023-01 and subject to the conditions of approval set forth in Exhibit A and Resolution 2023-01.
Do I have a second? Okay, bring it back to us for more discussion before we vote. Anybody got anything else?
This farmer is looking to bring business to an area that's traditionally been heavily cultivated. It's in an area that I'm assuming there's not many licensed farms, but he has been in the licensing process from the very beginning. Signed up with the water board before there was even a program. This farmer who owned this 80 acres of land that looks like if it was classified and zoned, it would be zoned agriculture, but it's so far out in the reaches it was never zoned, has hope of having a legit cannabis business that's able to expand and weather the storms of all the economic and political turmoil of legalization. The licenses or the neighbors, who are the closest neighbor is 647 feet from the farm itself. The farthest northern reaches of the farm is in support of it. I'm not really sure if it matters if it's 10 feet in one direction or 10 feet in the other direction, north or south. This is a business that will be hiring employees in a very rural area that really needs business. I don't see any reason why this project shouldn't be supported.
Yeah, and I agree. Those neighbors that are within those setbacks have provided letters of support. And I think to say that a business should plan for not having to use variances is not correct. This is a business that is thriving in a dying community, and we should be encouraging business. And if he needs a setback to develop his business to be profitable for himself and his family, I firmly think we should get behind that and support him and get him to work. 4 years to get here is ridiculous. It's a continuing problem, but we shouldn't stand in the way.
Well, I'd like to add, though, that supporting business and all the other good things that he wants to do just don't happen to be criteria for issuing a variance. I do think a variance is warranted in this case because of unique topography and the shape of the parcel and the other criteria that apply. So I'm okay with the variance because of that, because of the criteria in the variance that are applicable, and all the good things he's doing. Those are good things, but they don't meet the criteria for why someone should get a variance, as Chairman Sharp was pointing out.
Right. They could move it and cut down more trees or build up the wetlands. Anything is possible, but it seems like within this property, that is the most appropriate place without providing more hardship or.
Yeah, hardship isn't a criteria.
or cutting, more environmental impacts.
None of those are criteria for variances. And that's like kind of the point that we're trying to drive home here, is that variances have to be a unique situation, not cutting trees, not that it's a burden, but there's no other possible way for this to be done. And I agree with Commissioner Fall in granting it, mostly because of the topography, the stream beds on both sides of the build. But be clear that the variances are a tool used in planning.
Defined by state law.
Don't fall under any of the things that you gentlemen are suggesting.
I think there needs to be some clarity. While I agree with you generally with variances, unfortunately, there is not one supervisor that is present at the time that this ordinance was drafted and we discussed variances, nor is there one staff member, nor is there one commissioner that is present that was at the meetings when the term variance for cannabis was established. It was a calamity that they use the word variance because it has two different meanings, but there was very specific use for a cannabis variance, recognizing that cannabis existed in our region already. And we as a county, we as the voting public wanted to encourage these businesses to come into the fold. And so one word, two very different meanings, very little historical knowledge, but it's written somewhere. Maybe that's someplace for county council to provide our fellow commissioners with that historical understanding so that we could have a clear definition of what a cannabis variance is for this program versus the traditional California variance.
All right. Is there any other comments?
One of the thoughts that I do have, I forget the width in footage of what this parcel is. I believe Jeff had told me, but if you were to take his site and you put it right dab smack in between the north property line and the south property line, just the width of the parcel would make it to be where the cultivation site would actually be a fairly small spot without the variance because of that 500 thing. And so it's like he would have to shoot from crossing the creek all the way up over the ridge and everything else in just a small strip. And so the topography is a huge thing here.
And the shape of the parcel is one of the things that you can consider. So that's right.
Yes.
The shape of the parcel is part of the justification for a variance.
Correct.
For some clarity, was this variance in that motion?
Yeah.
That's part of the recommendations in the motion? Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else, commissioners? Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and hold a vote.
The motion is as stated in the staff report.
That is correct.
Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Commissioner Sharp, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. 5-0. The motion is passed.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you, everybody, really.
And sorry you had to come all this way twice.
Yeah, sure. Almost 3 times.
Chairman Sharp, if I just for 1 second, I didn't want to bring this up during the vote or anything like that, but just so that we know, the cannabis ordinance is currently in rewrite. It just started today. And so the word variance is being basically removed
Use waiver.
from the ordinance. It's going to be like setback, or it's going to be something different. That's
Very good.
Just so you know.
We're going to take a quick restroom break. We'll go 5 minutes. We'll meet back here at 7:18 or 7:18. Okay, folks, welcome back. We're going to move on to item 3, annual initial variance. And it looks like planning, you'd like to continue this item? All righty. So we will continue this item to the next when?
So planning is requesting that item 3 and item 4 get continued to a date uncertain.
Perfect. I don't think, can I have a motion to move these items to an unspecified date?
I'll make that motion that we move items 3 and 4 to an specified date in the future.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Moving on. Item 5 is an ordinance amending Title 15 Building and Construction of the Trinity County Code establishing an electrical vehicle charging station, streamlined permitting process. A request for Planning Commission, a request for a Planning Commission recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on an appropriate zoning districts for electrical vehicle charging stations. Location, countywide. Planner, S. Fisher. Ms. Fisher?
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and member of the public in the audience and members on Zoom. I'm going to spend the next few minutes discussing the draft ordinance for Title 15 Buildings and Construction, which would introduce a new section to our code establishing an electric vehicle charging station streamlined permitting ordinance. This item went to our County Board of Supervisors a few times. It was brought about by State Assembly Bill 1236 and Assembly Bill 970, which requires counties to adopt a streamlined permitting process in review of electric vehicle charging stations. So I figured that I could spend a little bit of time discussing what specifically those assembly bills are and how they relate to this draft ordinance. So starting off with Assembly Bill 1236, which is the older of the two, passed in 2015. This is what required cities and counties across California to develop an expedited, streamlined permitting process for electric vehicle charging stations, or EVCSs. So pursuant to this Assembly Bill, it's required that counties such as Trinity adopt a streamlining ordinance as well as a checklist, so the checklist is like an application that has all the necessary requirements for an electric vehicle charging station application. So there are scoring criteria provided by the state to judge whether or not this process or the ordinance adopted is adequate. So that includes adopting the streamlining ordinance, to create permitting checklists, to create an administrative approval process, or like through a building permit process for electric vehicle charging stations, making the review of electric vehicle charging stations permits be to health and safety, allowing there to be electronic signatures for these permit applications, not making the electric vehicle charging stations be subject to association approval. And if there are any deficiencies to the application, all deficiencies will be captured in just one letter where the applicant can revise. So there's not going to be like kind of like a needling process of here's one thing wrong here, you resubmit, here's another thing, and so on and so forth. AB 970 expands on the existing requirements of AB 1236 and establishes timelines for review. So there's a different timeline of review for 1 to 25 stations compared to more than 25 stations. So for an application that includes 1 to 25 stations at a single project, it is required that the application is complete after 5 business days. If there hasn't been a letter given to the applicant of incomplete or like a deficiency notice, and if the county has, so once it is dubbed complete, there is also a certain number of days in order to issue the permit, which
It's 5 and 10 days.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So 5 days for completeness and 10 days to be issued. So they expand upon that timeline for the 26 or more, which is 10 business days for complete, and then 40 days after that for approved. Also in AB 970, there are parking requirements. So if there is any issue with establishing an electric vehicle charging station because of existing parking structures, they're found to be accessory to parking and also can replace a parking spot and meet that requirement. So the reason why the Board of Supervisors brought this to the Planning Commission for review was concern that the proposed ordinance, which is attachment A, could create issues as far as the different zone districts of our county. So I included some references to a July 2019 California Electric Vehicle Charging Station Permitting Guidebook that was released by the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, which I believe, although it was released before AB 970, but after AB 1236, so I believe it's consistent with the intent of state legislature on how they would like local jurisdictions to process electric vehicle charging stations. And one excerpt from the guidebook is that charging should be considered and included within general plans, capital improvement plans, climate action plans, design guidelines, and zoning codes as applicable. And also it should be noted that within the context of permitting charging stations and support equipment on existing sites, local zoning and parking considerations should not factor into the permit approval process. So that's the framework that we have to work with. The language in the assembly bills speak to not wanting the electric vehicle charging station application process to be, they want it to be administrative, right? Not a discretionary review. But there isn't really that much language speaking specifically, like if you were to like control F, like zoning, you don't really see anything that speaks to that. So there is a bit ambiguity there. There was a discussion with county council when it did go to the Board of Supervisors, how much wiggle room we had with zoning. And that's when it was decided that it would go to you to make a determination on that. So I included the various, all the zoning districts within the county, which include general descriptions for our review. So we can see, based on the general intent of these different districts and those that had more ambiguous general descriptions, I included what the principally permitted uses are so we can get a good idea of the intent of each district to determine which are compatible with electric vehicle charging stations. So when we think of electric vehicle charging stations and the general plan, the only guidance I really have to lean on from the state is that previous excerpt I read saying that charging should be consistent with the general plans. And while the general plan is not zoning, zoning is like the implementing tool for land use in the county. So on top of having these general descriptions for the different districts, I also included the land use general plan designation and a zoning district compatibility matrix as one of the attachments. So you can kind of get a good idea about what zoning districts are allowable with what designations. And I understand that this wasn't part of the request to the board, but there was concern and I believe this is linked to zoning, so I wanted to bring it up about this ordinance and the California Environmental Quality Act and the ramifications of that. So as currently proposed, if a electric vehicle charging station is reviewed through building permits are typically a ministerial action, which ministerial actions are like a statutory exemption under CEQA. But I did do a lot of research to see, how other jurisdictions have processed electric vehicle charging stations in the past and spent a lot of time on SequaNet, which is like where we upload projects for state clearinghouse review. And primarily I found that projects were had notice of exemptions filed for them for reasons such as an accessory structure exemption, which is a categorical exemption, is commonly used for electric vehicle charging stations. So I just wanted to throw that out there just to show that we're doing a little bit of review to see what the potential impact would be, but it's kind of hard to say since we don't really have a project in front of us definitively, since everything is kind of subjective. So all of that being said, I don't have a very cut and dry recommendation, but I recommend that the Planning Commission provide suggestions to the Board of Supervisors on what zoning districts that you find to be compatible with electric vehicle charging stations.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Is there any questions for staff at this time in regards to her report?
I have some questions. So these electrical vehicle charging stations, it's both ones that someone would put in their house for themselves and something like the Tesla one where, you have to pay, right? So it's everything from personal to commercial. Is that right?
So I've worked with the building department extensively on this one to make sure that I have a good grasp on what's going on here. And so I asked them that same question. I'm like, okay, well, is this the same? Because I've heard that, new homes have to have like a plug-in type of thing. So that plug in the house wouldn't be this type of permit, but if you were to get like a hookup, then it would be that type of, it would be the same
Could
residential.
you clarify what you mean by hookup?
So it wouldn't be like the plug like in a garage, but it would be like a standalone charging station. They have like a separate type of charging station for residential use than you would see like the Tesla.
So right now, if you added a charging station to your garage, would you need a building permit?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's ministerial. And I can elaborate quite a bit on this just because this is what I do. So electrical vehicle charging across the board is part of the California Uniform Building Code. So no structure goes up in the state anymore, residential, commercial, industrial, private or public, that doesn't have electrical vehicle charging stations in them. So that's every house, every school, every place that is built has to have electrical vehicle charging. That is determined, the amount of electrical vehicle charging at that build site depends on the occupancy. So if it is a commercial setup, so I can take the latest build that we did here in Trinity, which is the wellness center at the end of town there. We put in 8 electrical vehicle charging stations at that build. 2 of them are permanently installed. There's 6 that are future. And part of this code that we're looking at here allows for those provisions. So you can put in the conduits and you can build the infrastructure, i.e. the switch gear, the electric, large enough to accommodate the amount needed. And that amount needed is based on parking spaces that are going to be used. That's how they develop the standard for that. So, that's kind of how electrical vehicle charging stations. The Tesla station we also did at the Holiday Market. That was a ministerial permit. It was not required to come before the planning because it's an auxiliary use. Same situation. That was based actually not on the size of Holiday's parking, but the ability and the willingness for Holiday to lease that property to Tesla for them to put those stations in. So that's kind of the state's outlook and the Uniform Building Code on electrical vehicle charging stations.
Thank you. Thanks. That helps. So the scoring criteria, is there a number that we have to get to, or, if we only meet 6 out of the 7, what happens? I mean, are there points that you get? I mean, I don't know what the scoring criteria means.
So these are the points that the state is looking for. So when most of the draft ordinance is like a boilerplate template that was provided by GoBiz, but we were working with the governor's office through development, and there is minor tweaks based on different department recommendations. Like the Department of Transportation wanted to add that if if a charging station is so close to the right of way that it has to be approved, or it couldn't be so close, right? And then that was approved by the governor's office, and they said, okay, well, you have your ordinance is consistent with what we're looking for. So it has those standards. It has the electronic signature requirements. And then also, which this is also attached, but that checklist, they said, okay, the checklist is consistent and has everything we're looking for. So those two in combination, I believe, meet all of the scoring criteria because it speaks to all of their concerns.
It has nothing to do with the amount of chargers that you actually put in, correct? The scoring system.
Oh, no. So
There's no requirement.
This is only how to process the permit.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I thought.
So, so one of the conversations I had was with the Public Utilities District, which is concerned about capacity for the type 3 or level 3 stations, you know, where they're concerned that someone at the far end of their distribution line wants to put in one of those 480 volt stations, and they won't have the capacity, and they don't have essentially there's no economic justification for them to upgrade this, 50 miles of lines to serve somebody who wants to do something. So the reason I asked about the scoring criteria is it possible to add a criteria to the checklist that says, I've checked with the PUD and they have agreed that yes, they have the capacity to serve that proposed EV station? Can we?
I can actually speak to that. So part of pulling a building application, when you submit a plan, even for an EV station, is that you have to provide what is called a one line and a load calculation for an electrical project. That one line and load calculation describes your build from the transformer into your EV station. So like the supercharger in Holiday. So that one line described the size of transformer that PUD would provide, the size of power that it would pull off of that transformer. And then it also provided load calculations with that. The building department is required, well, they are required by state to review that and make sure that the municipality can actually provide that power. So that is part of it.
But under the streamlining, if someone turns in this checklist to the building department and the building department doesn't look at it in 5 days, it's complete, and then they get their permit. So you kind of shortcut the ability, if depending on how busy the building department is, for the PUD to come back and say, but we don't actually have that ability, that capacity. You've kind of eliminated that option.
But if they can't build it, they can't build it. So I can give you, for instance, how the city of Reading works.
But so the PUD is concerned that essentially with this mandate, that they're going to have less ability to say, we're sorry, we can't serve that, because somebody's going to be saying, I have my permit. You're supposed to be expediting and streamlining and, encouraging all this stuff. I have my permit, so you need to spend a buku bucks to add capacity.
Well, there's a thing called plan review. And so any logical, and that doesn't mean everybody is, but they would probably put their plan out in front and do the legwork. So they'd hire an engineer, they would do the load calculations, and the engineer would contact PUD during that design process and go, do you have the capacity to do this? Knowing that they only have 5 days. It's a huge investment. That's almost $1 million sitting in Holiday Market. It's not like somebody's going to walk in here and go, I'm going to slap down $1 million without doing my homework. And even if, let's just say the instance happened where it got through, who is it going to serve, the applicant or PUD, if they can't get the power? The applicant just spent all that money for nothing, because if the power is not there, it's not there. They can't just create it.
Right, that's the concern.
Well, I mean, that's the point, though. I mean, nobody's going to put down $1 million if it's not even possible to do it.
So for clarity, just because the planning department, which is overworked, doesn't get to it within 5 days, it's automatically approved, that doesn't mean that PUD is going to be able to provide them with the juice.
It doesn't,
do
and the
that.
state does not require PUD to act on that either. This
Are
is
you
just-
sure? Is that true?
Oh, I just, right now, the planning department only does plan review on these permits, so they're currently just solely processed through the building department.
Okay, I just want to say that's a concern, that somewhere there's nothing in the checklist that says, I actually checked with PUD to make sure they have the capacity. So I would just want to go on record as saying that's a concern.
And so maybe that could be written into plan review at the, instead of, and I think we're, you know,
Well, I was asking if it could just be in the checklist, that if you're proposing
Yeah.
to install a level 3,
mhm.
yes, I've checked with PUD and I have confirmation that they have that capacity. That's why I was asking, could we add something like that to the checklist? Would the governor's office have a little snit fit, or is that okay with the scoring criteria? Because I'm assuming that they're thinking most places, power distribution is not an issue. But in Trinity County, there's a lot of places where, like, we tried to get a 400 people, the cannabis growers that are trying to get 400 amp service, and PUD is saying, no, we can't do that. But then somebody right next to them says, I want this charging station, a level 3 charging station, and I have priority because the government, state wants to encourage charging stations. I could just see some, issues coming up.
I think if you want to make it a recommendation to bring to the board, I think that would be fine.
So let's get back on, well, and moving through this motion and then bring it back to us. So, is there any other questions and we will come back to staff on this, I'm sure, but I'd like to get some public comment going here. So I think, let's go ahead and take it to the public for a minute. And, is there anybody on the floor that would like to comment on this? You're here.
So
Go ahead and state your name for the record.
John Brower from Junction City, and it seems the state's intent here was to really get this moving and try to. Their hope is that charging will keep up with what is kind of now a forced introduction of electric vehicles in the state. That's already in statute, and there's little Trinity County is going to be able to do to buck that. And I know that Trinity County sure doesn't like having mandates crammed down our throat without our input, like the CEQA exemption. And there's still a sting left over from the statutory CEQA exemption from the cannabis permitting and the ensuing complications from that. However, Trinity's also got this beautiful clean power source. And Trinity is the poorest county in the state and fuel's $5 to $6 a gallon now. So I want to encourage the commission to stick with and support what's in the staff report that's pulled out of the guideline from the state, where it says, quote, it should be noted that within the context of permitting charging stations and support equipment on existing sites, local zoning and parking considerations should not factor into the permit approval process unless the project would pose a substantial health and safety risk. So it's hard to imagine a substantial health and safety risk to these as long as they're installed to code by a state licensed electrician that knows their way around this stuff, and all the engineering required, and the equipment continues to improve with time, and it goes on to state that it has to be certified by an underwriter laboratories or something like that. So I'm having a hard time seeing how this could pose a substantial health or safety risk really anywhere in the county where there is electricity or anywhere where we park cars. Someday soon, we're going to have electrical big rigs, logging trucks, and heavy equipment, and on and on. So Commissioner Sharp, I think you're in a good business. And it seems it's probably in our long-term best interest to kind of swallow our pride and go along with this state mandate, as much as it does sting. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody on Zoom that would like to comment? Okay, with that, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I'd like to ask, would this be a conflict of interest for you? Would you like to step out of the room so you can do this business within the next year?
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
It's any projects that are going to come forward at all are always, especially at the state level, are competitive. So I don't get anything unless I'm smart enough to bid on it. So it's not like I have anything to gain or lose. So I don't have any projects in front of me that involve electrical vehicle charging stations at the commercial level.
I think this would inhibit you from being able to bid on a job within the next year for anything that would involve this ordinance.
Yeah, I disagree.
Okay.
You noted.
Also worth noting that level 3 isn't for residential. It's to say that people are going to put level 3 in at their house. It's completely in my wheelhouse to understand that part of it. That's not going to happen. It's a 3-phase power. It's 12208. It's beyond the level of this commission. Commissioner Sharp might understand, but you're not putting a level 3 charging in at your house. It's just not going to happen.
Right, I understand that. I did. Thank you, Todd, for getting my community input. But I was looking at the use of charging stations in the North Lake, where people have put charging stations in their houses there. A place like Bonanza King Resort put in a charging station at the resort. And that was to attract people to come up from the valley, and they are kind of towards the end of PUD's transmission lines. They're up in Coffee Creek. So if you have all the resorts up there wanting to put in a fast charging station, is that going to cause a capacity problem?
Well, as you all know, I'm intimately aware of the PUD's capacity. It's not going to be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, and I could speak to Roy as well. I mean, it's like Mr. Broward said, we are the golden child for green energy. We have a dam that produces far more power than we could ever even think about using. We don't use. Is that correct, Rory?
We use about 1/3 of our allocation.
1/3. Okay. What we don't have is transmission lines. And what better way than to go along with the state and maybe get state dollars to improve those transmission lines in our poor county to encourage electrical vehicle charging in the North State by tapping into the infinite resource that we do have that we do not use.
So to follow with that, then I would say, as far as zoning designations, I'd like to see it pretty much everywhere.
Absolutely.
If somebody wants to put it in their home, fine. If they want to put it next to the general store or on their farm, or if they choose to do that and there's a use that they think is justified, I don't see why you can't put it in all those zoning designations.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, it could also
Cream shop,
Yeah.
next to the gas station,
Especially,
any place.
especially like I said, in the North Lake where we're trying to bring tourists up.
Absolutely.
I mean, I hear on the radio, like the guy over in Surprise Valley that always says, come stay at my, hotel and I have a charging station. I'm like, so I think it should be optional everywhere.
out too that our school district has just recently purchased one, and they will get another electrical bus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not only do you need it for private sector, but it is the public sector and it's our school children. So, what do you do with a bus that's been stuck in snow all day that has to go to the North Lake and recharge? There better be charging stations everywhere. And it's not, we're not, you know, I know we're Trinity County and I know we like to go our own way, but the reality is that's the way of the world. It's not just the state. There's, you know, there's a company called Electrify America that is literally going across the United States, putting these things everywhere. Tesla is putting these things everywhere. I think Tesla just signed off on allowing other cars to be able to plug into their systems, which opened up like 1 million sites to consumers. It is the future, and the future is now. It's not something down the road. PUD's issues with their transmission lines are just that, they're issues, and there are dollars out there to grow that line.
It's worth noting, of course, and I agree with everything Commissioner Sharp said. You know, Tesla, of course, is the benchmark, but we've got Lucid, Polestar, Rivian. You know, they're out there. They're getting more and more prevalent in our community. So I would agree with both of you.
So this is a little besides the zoning issue, but Bonanza King did put in the charging station. Then the county immediately raised their taxes because of that improvement. So they disconnected it. So I think the supervisors might want to consider, if you're trying to encourage tourists to visit, you know, because there's a charging station, they might not want to discourage that kind of implementation because of the increase in taxes.
I think we could probably make a recommendation with this motion to have that amended.
Agree. Seems like a very strange thing to do.
I know.
So I would agree.
We definitely want to promote infrastructure in our county. And this is one thing that will bring money to our county. It will bring newness to our county. And being in the way of this at all, or trying to put our foot in the state's mouth on this is certainly not going to get us in any better situation than we're in now.
I think you got the consensus of the group. What else do you need?
Would it be possible to get a motion for all the recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see. I'll take a
You want to take a stab?
I'll take a stab. So I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Supervisors that all zoning designations be eligible for EVCS. Right? And that the Board of Supervisors consider ways to encourage EVCS, such as not increasing their taxes for that improvement. And we'll just let PUD deal with their issues separately. Okay, so that's my motion. Those two things, those two sentences.
I'd like to second that with an amendment that we approve the state mandate at how it's written.
The ordinance and the checklist.
The ordinance, yeah, how it's written. And I know we don't have one currently, and I'm going to kind of gloom on here. I know we don't have one that's written currently, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to get to.
So for the streamlining ordinance?
Yes.
So that's attachment A.
Okay, so the county has written it,
So it's written, but it hasn't been adopted yet.
but it does meet the state requirement.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so sorry.
Thing. I haven't said anything, but I struggle with this. Maybe it's because maybe I'll just being honest. I want to just voice my opinion for real quick. But it was like, I'm one of those guys who I hate it when the state tells me I have to do something. I'm just being honest with you. It doesn't sit well with me. And one of the things that where I struggle is like, okay, I get the electric vehicle thing. They're pushing it. Well, what happens because they're pushing the state solar also? And it's like I live on an off-grid system. I'll tell you what, it's like I ran my generator for the last month more than I ran in those time. Why? Because solar panels don't do it. And it was like, okay, we got the lake that provides an unlimited amount of water, but it's like it's like the majority of the vehicles at this point are not electric vehicles. I know that it's going that way. They're pushing that way. But it's like, I tell you what, it's like, it's like the state told us that we got to get rid of CEQA for this thing. It's like, it's this, they said, okay, you got to use CEQA for everything. But the truth of the matter is, it's like this, the federal government did more damage environmentally than what I could ever do in the fires when they burn us out. And they're saying, oh, bypass this. And you know what? It's like, what about like, there's not one single electric vehicle in my district down there. And it's like, and we got two gas stations in my city. Why don't we loosen up a little bit of the CEQA stuff so we could get a little more competition in Ruth instead of us having it in Kettenpalm, so we don't have to pay $7 a gallon or $8 a gallon when everybody else is at $4. It was like, because it's like, it's for vehicles, it's for recreational and business travelers. But it was like, I struggle with this, that they're forcing the electrical stuff on us when it's like, if they streamline more, if we can streamline, if it's that necessary that we streamline everything, it was like, let's also do it so we could get an extra gas station or two at the south end of the county, because it was like, that would be dead. That is like, they're buying it for $3.33. I bought it for $3.33 in Reading, and it was $7 a gallon in Ruth. We could use a little competition over there. It's like, it would sure be handy. And it was like, and so that's why I struggle with this, because it's like, oh, it's never gonna benefit me. Why? Because like, I'll never own an electric vehicle, at least not in the near future, for one thing. And it's like, and there's, I'm not the only one. I don't see many electric vehicle owners in the South County.
Todd, I don't mean to interrupt, but I would suggest that people back in the 1800s, when we were going to gasoline automobiles and they had their horses and their hay barns, probably made the same argument.
They could have, but
the reality is that's the future. And
I
it may
know
not be for you, but your children for sure.
it doesn't sit well with me. That's where it bothers me.
$7 a gallon, you should get an electric car.
Exactly.
No.
You're giving the wrong person your money, man. Big oil.
It's like, no, it's like I was buying it in Reading and transferring it home with 100-gallon fuel tanks. It was like, I don't give Dolly my money.
I would just like to add one thing, that the way everything is written right now as well, if they built a new gas station, because it would be a new build, they would have to put in a charging station.
You're correct.
So,
There you go.
So I'm hamstrung no matter what, huh?
Getting an EV, buddy.
Doggone. I just struggle with it. I'm just being honest.
Well, that's
I understand progress. I understand that this is the way it's going, and I'll probably vote yes on it. But it was like, but nonetheless, I wanted to voice my opinion. By golly,
noted.
It's like, so I just wanted to get that off my chest. That it was like, it rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think most people that live here feel the same way. But we do have a reality.
I know. And it was like, but it rubs me the wrong way that it was like that they're like, oh, we're going to bypass CEQA on this, but we're not going to bypass because it's his agenda, the governor's agenda. And it's like, but we're not going to we're not going to give up CEQA on anything else. And it was like, come on.
But look at it this way,
I'm
Tom.
sorry.
So
I got it off my chest.
You're encouraging free enterprise, because you're saying it can be anywhere in the county where someone wants
That's
to
no
have the
government.
oomph and
I like no
gumption to put it in.
CEQA means.
Yeah, I like it.
And you should be all about this.
But how about no government for a lot of things?
Well, that's another conversation.
Okay.
All right. So we've got a motion and a second on the table. Could you repeat that motion back to us as you understand it?
So the motion that I got was the Planning Commission moves to recommend to the Board of Supervisors all zoning should be eligible for electric vehicle charging stations, EVCS, and the board should consider ways to encourage EVCS, such as not increasing taxes for improvements.
And with Commissioner Sharp's amendment that we would recommend adoption of the Exhibit A ordinance and checklist.
Catching my right.
I paid attention.
I made notes on you now. Okay, I think we've got a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Sharp, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote? Again, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
I'll say aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
5-0, motion passed.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on to Planning Commissioner reports. Commissioners, do you have anything to report?
Yes, I have a report. So I sat with our newly elected district supervisor, Heidi Harris, and she informed me that she is going to appoint a new planning commissioner. And so if this is my last planning commission meeting, I just would like to express that it has been an honor to serve in this capacity, to serve the public, and it has been a pleasure to work with my fellow commissioners and staff. Best
Thank
of
you
luck.
for that, Commissioner Duncan, and it has been an honor to work with you, and you have kept me sharp and on my toes, and you've been a good companion, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same, Duncan. It's like I'm gonna miss you.
Mhm.
I really, it's been a privilege and to get to know you and work with you.
You can still call me.
I will. I will.
I just want to add something to that. I really admire the way that you went after all things planning commission. I really do. You took on a state level role. You got involved quickly, and that was admirable, and I commend you for that. So good job.
There are some seats available now. Mhm.
Noted. All right. Anything else, commissioners? Nope. Okay, with that, I'm going to go back to the planning director for a report.
Okay, so like I said earlier, the cannabis ordinance actually is in rewrite as of this morning. We had the kickoff this morning. And so over the next few months, we're going to kind of mirror what's going on with the general plan where they had the community meetings. So we'll be having one in Hayfork and one in Weaverville. And then we're going to try to get them to maybe do some on Zoom as well, not just at the Board of Supervisors coming into the Planning Commission to actually give a kind of an update of where they're at and what they're looking at as well. So that'll be a good one. And really do I have anything else? Have we said that Bella is a cannabis planner now?
No.
No.
Yay, congratulations.
Welcome, Bella.
Thank you, Bella.
Do we have a
Everybody knows Bella.
director for the cannabis division?
Actually, we do. And man, I guess I had more than I thought I had here. So we do. Drew Plabani interviewed and was basically accepted, and the Board of Supervisors agreed to start him at step B of the M255 last week. So that was kind of a big deal. And so he's been doing a good job since September 8th as an acting. As of 1 January, he's considered the division director for cannabis now. So he is a great point of contact for anybody, any cannabis issues whatsoever. He believes in having an open office and people coming in and talking about their problems and what needs they have to go forward. So it's been a real pleasure working with him. Anything else? Okay. So the last thing I wanted to bring up was chairman role. Okay, so I don't know that this falls to me, but there's been a couple of conversations about this. Is the commission itself going to choose that? Or are we going to have kind of a consensus vote election, or is it just going to be stepping through using the resolution that we had before?
I'm not sure what I know the order, but with what I'm going to recommend as current chair is that that we move Commissioner Fall into the chair position. I think she's probably the most qualified, even probably more so than me, to step into that role. I don't think the new commissioner that would be coming in would be qualified to do that at this juncture, obviously. I think she just has a good grasp of planning and would be a great selection if that was okay to her. But I would definitely want to have a discussion with the commissioners before we make that decision and make sure that that is agreeable and really look at the roll call, how it traditionally goes. I know Commissioner McIntosh's district was next. That's obviously not going to work. So it would fall then to the next district. And who would that be, Commissioner Fall?
Yeah, and
Right?
is that the correct rotation?
It is. No?
Yeah.
It is.
The next rotation would be 4 and 1. And
One is present.
no,
2.
he's 2.
Oh, he's 2. Thank you. Yeah, okay, for the 1.
And that's what I always get. Who's who? So who's
Mhm.
4?
Yeah. 4 is where Duncan
Duncan
is
is.
right now.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. And then 1.
And it was 4 and 2, right? I'm getting confused. I gotta get my notes out.
And maybe, and might be a good time to relook at this, at another meeting.
I can send you the ordinance and the resolution. Skylar reached out to county council. Their recommendation was to follow the ordinance first and then look at the resolution. In the ordinance, it says to elect
Mhm.
the next chair, and the ordinance has a rotation map.
Correct.
So, and I can send those to everybody and you can look at that.
That would be great.
And then we could, at our next meeting, we would,
I'm not going to be at the next meeting, so can we agendize that for the following?
it will be for the 23rd, as we did not get the project ready that we thought we were going to have for
Perfect.
the 9th.
Excellent. I picked a perfect time to go on vacation. Look at that.
And since we got our meeting going today,
We're winning. So perfect. Let's agendize that for the 23rd meeting. And I'm assuming that we could probably have a discussion and or a rotation or a vote, however we decide at that point.
yes.
Perfect.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. Thank you, planners and staff. You guys are amazing. Good job today on getting us up and going and getting this done. So thank you again. And I have a motion to adjourn.
Do you have something, Skylar?
I really wanted to put all the kudos on Debbie. She went over here yesterday afternoon and was just working really hard with IT to make this work. IT even told her that if she wasn't trying to make this meeting happen yesterday, it just wouldn't have happened. So thank you, Debbie, for all the hard work you do.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Debbie.
Yes.
All right. With that, motion to adjourn.
I make a motion. We
A
adjourn.
second. Meeting adjourned.
You're rolling deep. I found my
So we-
Well, I moved.
Yeah, well, 'cause like I only got